Have you noticed that there are certain moments in life when nothing visible has changed, yet everything inside you feels different? It is as though the atmosphere begins whispering before your ears can hear it, and before your thoughts can catch up. Your heart already understands that something important is drawing near. No reminder is necessary. No one has to convince you. Somewhere beneath the noise of daily life, an ancient recognition quietly awakens, almost as if a promise your spirit made long ago has finally come back into view. Today is August 5th, 2026, and the simple fact that these words have reached you is something worth paying attention to. Whether you call it intuition, synchronicity, or timing, there is an invitation unfolding before you. In only 3 days, the Lion's Gate portal arrives, representing one of the most meaningful, energetic passages of the entire year. This is not an attempt to impress you with mystical ideas or dramatic claims. Instead, this is an opportunity to look inward and recognize the invisible journey that has already been unfolding inside your own life. Perhaps much of that journey has happened quietly, behind closed doors, in moments when no one else could fully understand the emotional weight you have been carrying or the silent changes reshaping who you are becoming. Before we continue together, allow yourself a brief pause. I would love for you to share something honestly. During these past several days, have you sensed an unusual shift inside yourself? Maybe it has appeared as restlessness, unexpected anticipation, or the feeling that something significant is approaching even though you cannot explain why. Leave your experience in the comments, because your story has value, and this community exists so those experiences can be witnessed rather than dismissed. If these words echo something you have already been feeling deep within yourself, remain here with me. Subscribe so you can continue this journey as we move closer to the opening of this symbolic gateway. If something inside you quietly says that you were supposed to encounter this message today, let that feeling guide you by liking this video. Now let us move deeper, beyond surface explanations, and explore what may be unfolding energetically, symbolically, and spiritually as this remarkable alignment approaches. Long before you ever learned the language used to describe these experiences, your inner world may have already recognized them. Maybe sleep has become strangely elusive, with nights stretching longer than they should for reasons that make no logical sense. Perhaps powerful emotions have appeared without warning, only to disappear moments later, leaving you standing in the middle of an ordinary day, wondering what invisible current just moved through your heart. You may have noticed forgotten memories returning unexpectedly, familiar faces from long ago, places you believe no longer held emotional power, or earlier versions of yourself that you thought had already been left behind may suddenly feel present again. Rather than viewing these moments as meaningless coincidence, or assuming your imagination is creating unnecessary drama, consider another possibility. During the days leading toward a major symbolic cosmic threshold, unresolved experiences often rise gently into awareness because they are asking for acknowledgement before they are finally released. It can feel as though the invisible space separating your past from your future becomes thinner, allowing everything unfinished, one final opportunity to be recognized before it quietly dissolves. At the same time, your intuitive awareness may seem stronger than usual, almost intense enough to make you question it. Someone unexpectedly enters your thoughts, and only minutes later your phone rings with their name on the screen. A melody forms in your mind, then somehow begins playing moments afterward. Repeating number sequences begin appearing with unusual frequency. 11, 11, 333, 808. Rather than treating these moments as simple superstition, many people experience them as gentle reminders, symbolic signals that seem to tap softly against the edges of awareness, inviting closer attention. These synchronicities are meaningful, not because they guarantee any future outcome, but because they often reflect an increasing sense of internal alignment. Your energy may simply be becoming more receptive to patterns that previously passed unnoticed. None of these observations should be understood as unquestionable prophecy or objective proof. Instead, imagine them as symbolic reflections, mirrors through which your own subconscious communicates using images, timing, and meaningful coincidence. If your sensitivity has intensified recently, if your awareness feels unusually heightened, or if you sense yourself becoming more awake to subtle experiences than ever before, you are not necessarily imagining anything unusual. You may simply be standing much closer to this symbolic gateway than you realized. To appreciate why this period has carried such significance across generations, we must lift our attention beyond daily routines and remember what the heavens have represented throughout human history. On August 8th, three symbolic forces come together in a way that many ancient traditions regarded with profound reverence. The sun continues its passage through the steady and fiery sign of Leo. Sirius, often described as the spiritual sun existing beyond our visible sun, rises in harmony alongside it. At the same time, the numerological resonance of 88 creates what countless spiritual traditions have interpreted as a symbolic doorway between inner and outer transformation. Within numerology, the number 8 has long represented infinity, standing upright, expressing continuous movement between invisible potential and physical reality, between spiritual awareness and material experience, between the identity you have been living and the quieter version of yourself that has patiently been taking shape beyond your current perspective. Ancient Egyptian traditions connected Sirius with themes of rebirth and renewal. Its appearance coincided symbolically with the flooding of the Nile, bringing life back to land that had previously appeared barren. In symbolic language, scarcity gave way to abundance. Because of this history, discussions about the Lion's Gate do not describe an actual doorway opening across the sky. Instead, they point toward a symbolic and energetic opportunity that generations of mystics, seekers, and spiritual practitioners have returned to repeatedly as a reminder of courage, renewal, and the rediscovery of one's own inner fire. Year after year, this period has served as a collective mirror, reflecting humanity's desire to release what no longer serves and realign with deeper purpose. If you have spent recent months quietly rebuilding yourself through difficult decisions, patient healing, and small daily choices that no one else fully noticed, this approaching window may feel surprisingly familiar. Rather than seeming like mythology or folklore, it may feel as though something inside you has been anticipating this moment long before your conscious mind recognized the calendar. One truth about profound spiritual transitions often goes unspoken. Moments of expansion are frequently preceded by periods that feel unexpectedly heavy. Before life seems to widen, it often feels as though everything narrows. If recent days have brought exhaustion that rest alone cannot explain, emotions arriving without invitation, or the strange sensation of carrying invisible weight through ordinary moments, resist the temptation to conclude that something is wrong with you. It may simply indicate that you are moving through the compression that often comes before meaningful release. Nature repeatedly reveals this pattern. Storms gather pressure before rainfall finally arrives. Seeds remain hidden beneath complete darkness before finding enough strength to break through the earth toward sunlight. Genuine growth rarely begins in comfort. It asks for patience when answers are unavailable. It asks for honesty when avoidance feels easier. It asks for the courage to remain present with discomfort rather than escaping from it. During this period, relationships that once felt stable may suddenly invite re-evaluation. You may discover an unexpected desire for solitude, quieter environments, fewer obligations, or greater distance from people whose presence no longer reflects the person you are becoming. This is not necessarily emotional coldness or rejection. It can simply represent your inner world, making room for what is preparing to enter your life. If these experiences describe your recent reality, pause for a slow breath and remember that you are not facing this journey by yourself, even if loneliness has occasionally convinced you otherwise. Within spiritual language, many people refer to this process as a timeline shift, describing it as a subtle yet meaningful reorientation in the direction of one's life. Symbolic thresholds, such as the one arriving in 3 days, are often associated with exactly this kind of internal recalibration. There are several experiences that many people recognize while standing near periods of genuine transformation, and rather than offering them as rigid rules, consider them reflections through which you may recognize your own story. Some notice that time itself feels unusual. Entire days seem to disappear almost without memory, while isolated moments become astonishingly vivid, lingering with unusual clarity. Others report dreams becoming richer with symbolism, filled with people, places, or memories, carrying unmistakable emotional importance, even when the dreams themselves seem impossible to understand logically after waking. Sensitivity towards surrounding energy often becomes stronger as well. Crowded environments may suddenly feel exhausting. Certain individuals may leave you feeling unexpectedly drained, while conversations with others create an immediate sense of peace and familiarity, almost as though you have returned home after a very long journey. Physical sensations may accompany these inner experiences. Some describe warmth or gentle pressure near the crown of the head. Others notice fluttering within the chest or emotional waves arriving and departing with surprising intensity. None of these experiences should be interpreted as medical explanations or scientific conclusions. They are simply patterns frequently described by people navigating periods of deep personal transformation, and they deserve curiosity rather than fear. Perhaps the most meaningful sign of all is the quiet voice growing stronger inside you. It rarely shouts. Instead, it patiently encourages honesty, invites change, and asks you to finally acknowledge parts of yourself that may have remained silent for years, simply to preserve comfort or avoid conflict. If these descriptions resonate deeply, trust that you are not inventing your own transformation. You are living through it now, only 3 days before the Lion's Gate arrives. Across continents, civilizations, and centuries, one remarkable theme appears again and again. Sirius has repeatedly been honored not merely as a distant star, but as a powerful symbol of wisdom, expanded awareness, and intelligence extending beyond ordinary human perception. The Dogon people of West Africa preserve knowledge connected to the Sirius star system that has fascinated anthropologists for generations. Ancient Egyptian priests designed their most sacred temples to correspond with its rising. Throughout many traditions separated by immense distances and different cultures, Sirius consistently appeared as a symbolic messenger, carrying light across unimaginable expanses of space, as a reminder that human life belongs to something infinitely greater than the worries occupying any single ordinary day. Whether you embrace these ideas as literal truth or simply appreciate them as meaningful symbolism, there is something deeply powerful about the image itself. Imagine light that began traveling across unimaginable distances long before your first breath, only to arrive during this exact season of your life. When only 3 days remain before a threshold, your heart seems to have recognized long before your mind did. That image alone invites reflection. Across countless spiritual traditions, this period has often been viewed as a time when universal wisdom feels more accessible than usual. Not because invisible forces suddenly decide to reveal hidden answers, but because something within you becomes quieter, softer, and far more willing to notice what has always been present beneath the constant noise of everyday life. During a week like this, your awareness may naturally become more receptive. The insights that once seemed impossible to reach can begin emerging without struggle, because your attention is no longer racing in every direction at once. Rather than searching outside yourself for rescue, certainty, or permission, you may begin realizing that the guidance you have spent so much time looking for has been patiently waiting inside you all along. Symbolic moments like this do not create wisdom. They simply help remove the distractions that have made it difficult to hear. Many spiritual communities describe experiences during periods like these using a single word: download. They are not referring to technology or information arriving from an external source. Instead, they are describing those extraordinary moments when understanding appears almost instantly, complete and unmistakable, without requiring endless analysis or careful reasoning. Perhaps you have already encountered something like this over the past few days. Maybe a question that had quietly occupied your thoughts for weeks suddenly answered itself during an ordinary moment of silence. Maybe clarity appeared while driving, walking, washing dishes, or sitting alone, arriving so naturally that it felt less like discovering something new and more like remembering something you had somehow always known. Experiences like these often accompany what many describe as a shift in vibration. Although that word is frequently used without much precision, it points towards something many people genuinely recognize inside themselves. It describes a change in the emotional atmosphere through which you move each day. Situations that once immediately provoked frustration may no longer hold the same power over you. At the very same time, you may find yourself becoming far more sensitive to dishonesty, emotional inconsistency, or environments that once seemed acceptable, but now leave you with a quiet sense that something no longer fits. This is not confusion, contradiction, or instability. It is an internal recalibration. Your deepest values are quietly adjusting themselves, and your inner compass is beginning to recognize directions it could not clearly identify before. Only 3 days remain before the symbolic moment that so many spiritual traditions have honored as a gateway for renewal and realignment. Regardless of whether you view it as an ancient spiritual observance, a meaningful symbolic practice, or a personal opportunity for reflection, one reality remains unchanged. You are the one who must take each step forward. No alignment in the heavens, no sacred date, and no brilliant star can complete the work that belongs within your own heart. The Lion's Gate does not promise transformation on your behalf. Instead, it offers something far more meaningful, a moment of honest reflection, an invitation to recognize what has reached its natural ending and what your life is finally prepared to welcome. If recent days have felt unusually heavy, consider another perspective. That weight may not have been punishment or evidence that you were falling behind. It may have been preparation. Preparation has a way of asking difficult questions before it offers meaningful answers, and when it is met with sincerity rather than resistance, it gradually becomes readiness. Before exploring how to spend these remaining days, there is something important to remember. There is no flawless method for preparing yourself for a symbolic threshold like this. Clarity cannot be forced into existence, and readiness cannot be manufactured through effort alone. What remains within your control is something much quieter. You can create room inside your life. You can choose silence instead of constant distraction. You can allow yourself honest moments where whatever needs to rise, soften, or transform before August 8th is welcomed rather than avoided. Rather than thinking about preparation as a series of tasks that must be completed perfectly, imagine it as an ongoing conversation with yourself. Some of the reflections ahead may resonate immediately. Others may not feel relevant at this particular chapter of your life, and that is perfectly acceptable. Spiritual growth has never depended on performing every practice correctly. Its foundation has always been authenticity, choosing what feels genuinely true instead of attempting to appear spiritually prepared for the approval of others. During these remaining days, what matters most is not elaborate ceremony or impressive ritual. It is your willingness to meet yourself honestly. It is your courage to ask difficult questions without immediately searching for comforting answers. Quietly consider what you are truly prepared to release. At the same time, ask yourself what future you have almost been ready to embrace, but have continued postponing through fear, habit, or uncertainty. As we move through these 5 practices together, allow each one the time it deserves. Resist the urge to hurry toward completion. Some insights may arrive during a single, quiet evening. Others may remain with you long after the symbolic portal has passed, continuing their work beneath the surface. That is not evidence that something went wrong. Meaningful transformation rarely follows a schedule. More often, it unfolds patiently, revealing itself only after enough space has been created for it to grow naturally. The first practice begins with release. Not dramatic abandonment or forced detachment, but calm recognition of what no longer belongs in the life you are intentionally creating. Perhaps it is resentment that has occupied your heart far longer than it deserved. Perhaps it is an outdated identity you have quietly outgrown, the version of yourself that constantly sought approval, endlessly explained every decision, or minimized your own needs so others would remain comfortable. Many spiritual traditions encourage writing during periods of release, because placing hidden emotions onto paper allows what has remained internal for so long to finally become visible. You may choose to write everything you are ready to leave behind, then safely burn the page or simply place it somewhere meaningful as a symbolic expression of your decision. The ritual itself is secondary. What matters most is the intention beneath it. I recognize this. I acknowledge its presence. I no longer choose to carry it in the same way. As you continue reflecting, notice what your body may have been communicating long before your thoughts fully understood. Tight shoulders, pressure across the chest, exhaustion that seems strangely resistant to sleep. These sensations are sometimes entirely physical, yet they may also reflect emotional experiences that have not yet been fully processed. A slow walk without distraction, unhurried breathing, or several quiet moments spent simply sitting with yourself may gently allow some of that tension to soften. None of this asks you to erase your history. Your past remains part of your story. The invitation is simply to stop allowing old experiences to determine every step of your future. Whatever you choose to acknowledge today may not disappear immediately, and it does not have to. Often, the simple act of naming something honestly is where its influence quietly begins to weaken. Occasionally, what emerges during this process appears older than your own personal history. Numerous spiritual traditions speak about ancestral patterns, inherited beliefs surrounding worthiness, scarcity, fear, and safety that move through generations long before we become aware of them. While reflecting, you may recognize that a fear you have always assumed belonged entirely to you carries a strangely familiar quality, as though it echoes voices and experiences that existed long before your own life began. You do not have to uncover every detail of its origin before allowing yourself to loosen your attachment to it. Sometimes recognizing that you were never meant to carry a particular burden forever becomes enough to begin placing it down. Once release has been acknowledged internally, expressing that intention externally can often deepen the experience. Many people discover that organizing a neglected drawer, clearing an overcrowded shelf, or removing unnecessary belongings from a forgotten corner of their home creates an unexpected feeling of emotional spaciousness. There is something quietly symbolic about allowing your surroundings to breathe again, almost as though your environment has been patiently waiting for permission to transform alongside you. Beyond physical surroundings, consider the atmosphere created by your own daily habits. Perhaps spend a few uninterrupted minutes in a peaceful room with soft lighting, leaving your phone elsewhere while you simply breathe without expectation. Certain traditions incorporate practices such as cleansing with sage or Palo Santo, or filling a room with the sound of a bell or singing bowl, believing that sound and fragrance can symbolically renew the feeling of a space. Whether you interpret those practices literally or simply appreciate their symbolic intention, the act of deliberately pausing and declaring that your environment is being refreshed can offer a genuine sense of grounding. Extend the same awareness to your digital world. Notice the accounts that shape your attention, unfinished conversations that quietly occupy your thoughts, and constant notifications that repeatedly interrupt your inner stillness. A brief period of uninterrupted quiet before August 8th may contribute more to your clarity than endless searching for external answers. The purpose is not to create perfection. It is to cultivate an environment, both around you and within you, that feels lighter, more peaceful, and more capable of welcoming whatever new chapter is patiently approaching. The third preparation is more subtle than any physical action, and in many ways it may be the most meaningful of all. It is the practice of reconnecting with your own intuition. Amid the endless activity of modern life, the quiet wisdom already living inside you is often the first voice to disappear beneath louder demands. Yet, it continues speaking. It gently points toward the decision you have delayed, the relationship that no longer feels aligned, or the opportunity that quietly waits for your courage. One of the simplest ways to hear that voice again is through genuine stillness. Even 5 uninterrupted minutes with your eyes closed, free from expectation, and without trying to accomplish anything, can begin changing the quality of your awareness. Rather than meditating to force an answer, simply listen. Notice what naturally rises into consciousness. It may be a forgotten memory. It may be the name of someone who carries significance. It may simply be a feeling of peace that reminds you how long you have been living without enough quiet. Journaling can deepen this experience as well, especially through a practice often described as intuitive writing. Begin with a question that asks nothing more than complete honesty from yourself. Ask quietly, what do I truly need to understand in this moment? Then allow your hand to move without stopping to edit, organize, or judge. Let every sentence arrive exactly as it wishes, even if it surprises you. Resist the temptation to decide too quickly whether what appears is important or insignificant. Simply continue writing until the words naturally come to rest. You may discover thoughts, emotions, or realizations that have been waiting patiently beneath the surface, unable to emerge only because your inner critic has always spoken first. When that constant voice of evaluation finally steps aside, even briefly, something much deeper often begins to speak. Welcome, whatever gently appears without immediately assigning dramatic meaning to it. Intuition almost never demands attention with loud certainty. More often it reveals itself through a calm and unwavering sense of recognition. It is the kind of truth that settles into your heart without needing proof because, somewhere inside, you have always known it belonged there. The fourth practice carries special significance in many spiritual traditions whenever an important threshold approaches. It is the practice of setting an intention that reflects genuine honesty rather than expectation. This is not about creating an ambitious list of desires or sending demands outward in the hope that life will obey them. Instead, it is an opportunity to quietly acknowledge the direction your heart sincerely wishes to move. Your intention may be as simple as saying that you are ready to trust yourself more completely. It may express a willingness to release fear surrounding change. It may simply declare that you are open to whatever aligns naturally with your highest path. There is no required wording and no sentence that carries more power than another. What gives an intention meaning is not elegant language, but authenticity. The words become valuable because they arise from what is genuinely true rather than from an image of what you believe you should want. Some people choose to write these intentions in a journal where they can return to them often. Others place a small reminder where they will see it throughout the day, perhaps beside a mirror or saved privately on their phone. Some never write anything at all, choosing instead to speak a single sentence softly with complete presence before allowing silence to follow. None of these approaches is more correct than another. The practice is never about the method itself. It is about the sincerity behind it. When an intention is rooted in genuine self-awareness, it begins functioning less like an order given to the universe and more like a compass that quietly influences the choices you make. Instead of forcing events into existence, It gently guides your attention toward the person you are gradually becoming. As August 8th draws closer, allow your focus to shift away from asking what you hope to receive and toward asking who you are finally ready to become. The fifth preparation appears remarkably simple, yet it is often the one most easily overlooked. It is the practice of becoming fully present in your own life. Conversations about symbolic gateways, sacred timing, and spiritual transitions can sometimes tempt us into living entirely in expectation, as though everything meaningful exists somewhere ahead, and ordinary life is merely a waiting room until the calendar reaches a particular date. Yet genuine transformation never unfolds in an imagined future. It happens within the present moment. It happens during an ordinary Tuesday. It happens in the quiet rhythm of your breathing. It happens while you sit here reading these words with your full attention. Grounding yourself does not require extraordinary effort. Walking barefoot across grass, sitting peacefully with a warm drink while every screen remains out of reach, or pausing long enough to notice 5 things you can see and hear around you may appear simple. But these moments create the stability that allows deeper inner work to become part of everyday life, rather than remaining only an inspiring idea. Treat your body with the same kindness during these remaining days. If you feel tired, allow yourself to rest instead of automatically pushing beyond your limits, because habit tells you to continue. Drink enough water. Step outdoors, even briefly, and allow natural light to touch your face. These are not mysterious spiritual rituals. They are ordinary expressions of self-respect that quietly prepare fertile ground where lasting change can take root. The symbolic portal will arrive regardless of how prepared you believe yourself to be. Yet approaching it with presence, steadiness, and honesty allows you to meet the experience without anxiety or urgency. Instead of waiting nervously for something extraordinary to happen, you arrive with calm readiness because you have already begun the work that truly matters. As these final 4 days continue unfolding, pause occasionally and recognize something important. You are no longer the same person you were only a month ago. Quiet changes have already been taking place within you long before you understood how to describe them. Every act of release, every moment spent creating space, every decision to listen inward, every intention spoken honestly, and every effort to remain grounded has never been about transforming yourself into someone entirely different. They have always been invitations to remember the person who has existed beneath layers of fear, expectation, exhaustion, and emotional weight. There has never been only one correct way to move through a symbolic threshold like this. Some individuals naturally feel drawn toward meaningful rituals filled with personal symbolism. Others discover equal meaning by sitting peacefully with a simple cup of tea while allowing one honest thought to settle into the heart. Neither path carries greater value than the other. Both are valid because what matters most is your willingness to show up for yourself in whatever form feels authentic during these remaining days. The feelings you have experienced recently did not appear without purpose. The unexpected restlessness, the unusually vivid dreams, the memories returning without invitation, each of these experiences has gently encouraged you toward reflection, release, and renewal. We are now close enough that many people describe sensing an almost imperceptible shift beneath the familiar rhythm of ordinary life. As August 8th approaches, that subtle feeling may become more noticeable, as though something inside continues quietly preparing for an important conversation. Whatever emotions this past week has brought into your awareness, whether they ask to be acknowledged, released, witnessed, or finally spoken aloud, remember that they have never existed apart from you. They have always belonged to your own unfolding story, patiently waiting until the right season to emerge. There is another truth that deserves to be acknowledged with complete honesty. Personal growth rarely follows a smooth and comfortable path. Much more often it feels uneven, uncertain, and occasionally overwhelming. There are periods when you question whether any progress is happening at all, because every step seems hidden beneath confusion rather than confidence. If recent days have left you feeling unsettled or emotionally disoriented, do not immediately assume that something has gone wrong. Very often, this uncertainty is simply what meaningful change feels like before it settles into a form that becomes recognizable. As we move together through these remaining days, consider offering yourself softness instead of resistance. So much of spiritual development becomes difficult because we instinctively tighten our grip around certainty, control, and the familiar structure of a life we already understand. Yet symbolic thresholds invite a different response. They ask for openness instead of force. They encourage trust instead of constant control. Whatever unfolds during the coming days does not require flawless preparation. It simply asks for your honest presence, one moment after another. If there is one essential truth to carry with you, let it be this. A symbolic threshold, such as the Lion's Gate, cannot give you qualities that were never yours. It does not create courage from nothing. It does not manufacture wisdom when none existed. Instead, it acts as an amplifier. It increases the volume of truths that already live within you until they become increasingly difficult to ignore. This may explain why so many people experience these periods as emotionally intense rather than effortlessly magical. Old habits, familiar fears, and long-standing patterns often rise more strongly because avoiding them suddenly becomes much harder. The relationship that has quietly felt out of alignment for months. The career that no longer reflects the person you are becoming. The self-doubt that has remained long after you have actually outgrown it. None of these experiences surface because life wishes to punish you. They emerge because symbolic thresholds function like carefully positioned mirrors, allowing you to see yourself with unusual clarity. What you choose to do after seeing that reflection remains entirely your own decision. If discomfort has appeared during this week, try viewing it not as failure, but as valuable information. Your inner world may simply be pointing toward the places where your honesty and attention are needed most right now. There is a meaningful reason that this symbolic gateway has long been connected with the imagery of Leo and the lion. The lesson is not one of aggression or domination. Instead, it speaks of a quieter form of courage, the willingness to be fully visible, to occupy the space your life genuinely deserves, and to stop making yourself smaller for the comfort of everyone around you. Many people learned very early that reducing their voice, minimizing their needs, and hiding their dreams felt safer than risking conflict or rejection. Yet eventually, there comes a season when that habit no longer protects you. Instead, it begins limiting the life you are capable of living. If these recent days have awakened dissatisfaction with that pattern inside you, honor those feelings instead of dismissing them. Courage rarely arrives through dramatic gestures. Sometimes it appears when you finally speak honestly in a conversation you have postponed for far too long. Sometimes it appears when you choose rest instead of exhausting yourself because guilt insists you should continue. Sometimes it begins with one quiet admission, spoken only to yourself, that you deserve more than you have been willing to accept. Whatever shape your courage takes over the coming days, remember that it has always belonged to you. No sacred date creates it. No symbolic alignment places it inside your heart. The threshold simply makes it easier for you to recognize what has been yours all along. There is one final understanding worth carrying forward. Whatever insights, emotional releases, or moments of clarity emerge around August 8th, were never intended to remain confined to a single day. The deepest part of this journey does not end when the calendar reaches August 8th. In many ways, that is only where the meaningful work truly begins. Lasting transformation is rarely measured by what happens during one symbolic moment. It is revealed gradually through the days, weeks, and months that follow, as you patiently weave every insight, every realization, and every quiet shift into the way you actually live. This process of integration is seldom dramatic. It does not usually announce itself with extraordinary experiences or constant feelings of inspiration. More often, it appears through ordinary decisions repeated with sincerity. It is choosing again and again to honor what you discovered about yourself, even when life returns to its familiar rhythm. It is remembering the intention you spoke from your heart on an ordinary Tuesday 3 weeks from now, after the emotional intensity surrounding this week has softened, and nothing remains except your own willingness to continue. During that season, offer yourself compassion. A moment of clarity does not instantly dissolve habits that may have taken years to form. There may be days when you notice yourself returning to familiar reactions, familiar fears, or familiar ways of thinking, even after feeling certain that something profound had changed within you. That does not mean the transformation failed. It simply reflects the natural rhythm of being human. Genuine growth almost never happens through one dramatic leap. Instead, it unfolds as countless quiet moments where you gently return to the truth you've already discovered and choose, once more, to live from it. If you eventually begin wondering whether anything meaningful actually shifted during this week, avoid measuring your progress by spectacular experiences. Look instead for the quieter evidence that often goes unnoticed. Notice the boundary you finally respected after avoiding it for so long. Remember the conversation you chose to have instead of postponing it once again. Recognize the few peaceful moments you allowed yourself without feeling guilty for slowing down. These simple choices may seem small, yet they often reveal far more about authentic transformation than dramatic emotional highs ever could. They are the places where lasting change quietly takes root. Wherever you happen to be on your own path, as you hear these words, know that your experience belongs exactly as it is. Perhaps everything we have explored together has felt deeply familiar, as though each idea reflected something your heart already understood. Or perhaps much of it has remained uncertain, leaving you with more questions than answers. Both responses deserve equal respect. Spiritual growth has never followed a single universal pattern. Every person moves according to a rhythm that belongs uniquely to them, unfolding at a pace that cannot honestly be compared with anyone else's journey. If this conversation left you feeling more overwhelmed than inspired, allow that to be acknowledged without judgment. Not every season requires an extraordinary awakening. Sometimes the most meaningful act available is simply allowing yourself to rest. Sometimes wisdom appears not through dramatic breakthroughs, but through giving yourself permission to stop striving, to stop pretending that you must always be prepared, and to let this particular date pass gently while your own unfolding continues according to its natural timing. On the other hand, if every part of this conversation seemed to echo something already living inside you, if each description awakened quiet recognition rather than surprise, honor that feeling as well. There is something meaningful about recognizing yourself in words you did not expect to hear. Whether you describe it as synchronicity, intuition, or simple timing, you arrived here only 3 days before a symbolic threshold that generations of spiritual seekers have chosen to remember. Perhaps something within you was simply prepared to receive this reflection now rather than sooner or later. Regardless of how you interpret that experience, remember one thing with complete certainty. You have not fallen behind your own life. You have not missed your opportunity. You stand exactly where your own journey has gradually led you, and there is quiet wisdom in accepting that truth. There is another perspective worth carrying with you beyond this conversation. Renewal almost never arrives as one unforgettable moment that permanently divides your life into before and after. It is easy to imagine personal transformation as though it happens in a single flash, where one version of yourself disappears and another immediately takes its place. Yet real rebirth is rarely so sudden. More often, it resembles a spiral, gently circling familiar themes while inviting deeper understanding each time you return. If courage, release, healing, or alignment seem to keep appearing throughout different chapters of your life, resist the temptation to believe you are simply repeating old mistakes. It may be that you are encountering the same lesson from a higher place than before, carrying greater wisdom, greater compassion, and greater awareness than you possessed during earlier seasons. Growth often revisits familiar territory, not because you fail to learn, but because each return offers another opportunity to embody what you now understand more deeply. As we reach the end of this journey together, there is one truth that feels more important than any other. No symbolic date, no celestial alignment, and no ancient spiritual tradition can complete the inner work that belongs to you alone. Whatever meaning you choose to give the Lion's Gate, its greatest gift is not certainty. It is reflection. It is a pause that countless people across generations have used to ask themselves two deeply honest questions. Who am I becoming? And am I willing to continue walking toward that person with openness and courage? Whatever you choose to release during these remaining days, whatever strength awakens within you, whatever quiet realization finally rises into your awareness, carry those gifts gently. Do not turn them into pressure. Do not treat them as deadlines that demand immediate perfection. Instead, think of them as invitations that remain available whenever you need to return. They will still be there tomorrow. They will still be there next month. They will still be waiting whenever you are ready to meet them again with fresh understanding. Before you question whether enough has changed, pause and recognize how much inner work has already taken place during this past week. Even if much of it has happened silently, beneath the surface where no one else could see it, it still deserves acknowledgement. Honor yourself for every moment of honesty, every difficult emotion you allowed yourself to feel, every fear you chose to examine rather than avoid. Let this symbolic threshold become less about reaching an imagined destination and more about continuing your journey with greater authenticity than before. If these words arrived at exactly the moment you needed them, I would truly love to hear what this experience has awakened within you. Share in the comments what you are choosing to release as August 8th approaches, or what you are opening your heart to receive. Your reflections may become the encouragement someone else has been quietly searching for, helping this community remain a place where people recognize pieces of their own stories in one another. If this conversation resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe so we can continue exploring everything this symbolic cosmic year has yet to reveal together. And if someone comes to mind while you are listening, someone who may need these words during this season of their own life, consider sharing this message with them. Thank you for spending this time with me, for bringing your presence, your openness, and your willingness to explore these ideas together. Until we meet again at the next symbolic threshold, take gentle care of yourself and continue walking your path one honest step at a time.